This is Your Own Best Company, a podcast for people who love to work alone. Welcome, everybody, to Your Own Best Company. My name is Franklin Taggart, and this podcast was my idea. Your Own Best Company is a podcast that is really kind of targeted for people who love working alone. And the person who's going to be my guest today is a person who is brand new to me. We've only just met, and I'm excited to get to know her a little bit. Bronwyn Jane is a medium and spiritual coach based in Australia. So I'm speaking to her, and she's on the other side of the world right now from me. And it's 8 o'clock on Friday morning there, and it's like 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon here. So she's already ahead of me. We were joking about that at the beginning. It's like, no wonder she can tell the future. She lives there. So anyhow, Bronwyn, I want to welcome you to the podcast, and I'm really excited to find out where we're going to go today.
Thank you for having me on your podcast and spending some time with me. I really appreciate that.
When did you know that you had these gifts?
I became aware that I was a little bit different when I was about 7 years old, when my grandfather passed away, and I could still see him, hear him, and interact with him, and assumed that everyone in my family could do the same. But when I told them, I realized that they couldn't. I also realized they didn't like that I could, and it scared them. So that's when I realized, and I quickly worked out, based on the fact that I was born into a religious family in a rural location, so they're very traditional, this was something that they weren't going to accept. So I just had to keep it to myself.
And how long did you keep it to yourself?
I kept it to myself for about, I'm trying to do the math now, it would be about 25 years.
Oh, wow.
I maneuvered through life still using it, still interacting with those that have transitioned, and being aware of that I knew things that other people didn't, and I would use it to basically help my friends, but not tell them how I knew.
Oh, okay.
So I just maneuvered through life like that for a very long time.
25 years is a long time. I mean, I'm not gonna reveal, but it's almost half of my life. In any case, Bronwyn, as you were discovering that this was something that was happening for you, did it cause any alarm for you?
It did. So by not being accepted by my family, my community, what it did was it created barriers within the family that I didn't share all, that I experienced, not only in regards to these type of experiences, but just life as well. So it shut me down a little bit. It also, that then flowed into other areas of my life. So I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be noticed. So it allowed me, or it actually didn't allow me. What happened was I just fell into the background because I was comfortable there and comfortable being what seemed like alone. I wasn't. because of what I could experience, but that's what happened, and I really sort of shut down and pulled away from people because they just didn't understand, and they weren't willing to consider either what I was going through. So it did really shift and change things, and created even I would say unwellness mentally as well, and as I had to process and work my way through that.
Yeah, I would imagine that there would be some kind of grieving to go through as you were discovering that in some ways you were different from other people.
Yes, and that other people didn't like that.
Yeah. And
didn't understand that and told you to stop. So it really was a process of how can you stop being you, and how can you stop feeling what you feel, and how can you stop experiencing what you are. But that was the expectation, to stop that. And so there was that internal battle of society, family, community wanted me to be something else. And so I was struggling to fit into that mold. And that's what it created, that pulling back, not being myself, not speaking, slipping into the crowd through life.
Now, did you say that your family was pretty religious?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And very traditional as well. So
All right.
we had sort of that whole rural lifestyle, very isolated where we lived as well. So there wasn't, I didn't know, there was no one else. I didn't actually know what I was until I was in my 40s. I had never encountered anyone else like me based on where I lived. So I had no other person to go, oh, they like me. I just didn't understand.
Yeah. Wow, that's a long time to go, isn't it?
It's a long time to be lost in the forest.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that that you had included in the application to join the podcast was you wanted to talk a little bit about what it was like for sensitive people and why so many people with sensitivities like this tend to want to be alone a lot of the time. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I will. Sometimes I think that we're sensitive and we don't know that we are. We just know that we don't maybe like people. We don't like being around them. They kind of annoy us, but we don't understand why. We just think it's on I'm going to say like a superficial level, but really what I have experienced, and I see it time and time again, even when I teach and guide people, is that the physiological aspect of what happens when we feel energy is occurring and people just don't realize. So when we come close to someone and because our electrons are coming out of our body, I'm kind of sciencey, that's who I am. So I'm not that woo-woo kind of person. So when that is coming out of our body and they're vibrating, they're interacting with other people's electrons. And if we're resonating at the same frequency, we're going to like them even though we may not know why. And conversely, if we meet someone and we don't like them and they haven't even opened their mouth, but we still don't like them, it's because they're at a different frequency to us and that the electrons are vibrating at different levels, so yours and theirs. And so we don't understand that this is what's happening. We don't understand that this is what's happening on that energetic level. We just know we don't like people. They drive us crazy. But it is the fact that your frequency and interacting with other people they're just at a different level to you. And so because we can't put words around it and we don't actually understand and we don't have practices to allow us to cope with interacting with people that don't resonate the same as us, we pull back and we stay by ourselves because it's just easier. And as sensitive people, this happens more for us. So we pick up on it more. If we go, say, for example, sometimes we might go to a mall or a large party and it can be really overwhelming. It's like, oh, I just need to get my shopping and go. Because without us realizing, we're going into that mall, into that shopping center, we're overwhelmed by the energy of everyone else that they're emitting. And it's like, I just need to do what I need to do and go home because there, I just have to feel my own energy. I'm not exposed to everyone else. And so therefore I can just cope with that.
I think you've just told the story of everyone that this podcast is for. You've just articulated it beautifully. It's like, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. It's like being in a public place is really, really difficult. And it feels confusing a lot of the time. And yeah, the sensitivities, the energy is just really hard to navigate when it's more than one person in the room. It's really tricky.
It is. And that's why it's nice to have the opportunity to share with everyone, one, what's happening and why we feel the way we do, and two, how we can still have meetings that we need to have, still go to large gatherings, and to be able to maneuver through that a little bit easier. And some of the simple ways to do that is to, before we have to interact with someone or a group, as I said, or go to the mall, to have that intention that I am actually not going to be impacted, because intention and the way our brain works and the way energy works is critical.
Yeah.
So to have that intention that the energy that is in the space is not actually going to permeate my energy. And sometimes if we're visual people, if we're creative people, we can almost, I like to think that I'm in like a big fish tank of an aquarium. It's like I'm just going to sort of really cool aquarium. It's what I'm going to put myself in, nice and thick. And so I can go through the function that I need to, interact with who I have to, but all their energy is not going to be able to get into my energy because I've created this visual. And people might think, oh, that just sounds absolutely ridiculous, Bronwyn. But it does work. And so I'm going to encourage people to try it. They will be very surprised if they set that intention that when I go to this meeting, I go to them all, I'm going to put myself in this special imaginary fish tank with the intention of that I'm not going to feel everyone else's energy. So I can do what I need to do and then go back to my safe space.
I don't think that's crazy at all. I think that's perfect. And it's something that I've had to learn how to do as well over the years, so that I can go, and perform on stage and things like that. I also wonder, do you create any kind of, I don't know, if you create any kind of physical space for yourself in public that is protected?
So as part of that process, for me, my space is how far my arm will stretch out.
Oh, very good.
So that's what I use as my measure. Now, depending on how happy I am, that can be a bit further away from the body. And if I'm feeling really insecure or unsafe, it can be closer to the body. But that's my general measure, is how far my arm would stretch out all the way around me. So front, back, head, feet, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is my space. And even when I know that I can sense someone, maybe walking past me or that wants to interact with me, or I don't, or even if I'm in a location that I feel unsafe and I can feel that there's someone around me that maybe is not a great person, going, no, this is there and you're actually not going to see me. You're not going to notice me. You're going to go straight past me. It's like, I'm not even here. Just go past.
Yeah.
Just to have that awareness with the energy and just go, no, we're not doing this today. We're just not. And once again, that setting that intention that we're just not doing this. And as a woman, so, sometimes we put ourselves in, we might be walking, from public transport to somewhere else, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, a bit scary. There might be people walking past that we feel intimidated by. It's like, no, you can't even see me. Go past. If you're going, you can go somewhere else. And I do that. And I find, once again, one, it shifts the energy within me. So I feel more empowered. I stand differently. I project differently. And also I know on an energetic level, that intention changes the vibration of the energy that I emit. And I know that can be felt on a really subtle level by people, even if they're not consciously aware.
I love that you brought up the fact that you love the science part of this. I think that science and woo-woo should be married. It's just my own personal opinion and belief, because I think that there's so much that we lop off from human experience when we sacrifice one for the other. I would be curious about what you just described. The intention and the power of the intention to kind of change our experience. What's behind that?
There is that, when we set an intention and that neurologic, there's a change neurologically.
Yeah.
That, because we are in a world of energy and we're in a world of vibration and waves, that changes the frequency. Everything has a frequency. Mm-hmm. And so that it permeates through us is what occurs by setting that intention. And even whether we say it aloud or we say it internally, but then shifts everything. If we're brave enough to say it externally, it adds a little bit more oomph to it, but sometimes we're not in a position where we can do that. But it does, neurologically, it changes something. It tells our brain's not as clever as we think it is. That's just my opinion. It's just not. We give it too much credit. But it does shift what happens to the chemicals that happen there and which parts of our brain light up, and that is felt through our body and then in turn on that atomic level.
I always have thought that words are the first level of manifestation. After you've taken your your idea from your imagination. It's like you form words around that, and that's the first manifestation of the idea. And it sounds like that might be kind of in the same line of what you're talking about.
Yes, and that's true. And then when we actually speak them rather than think them, that adds more intensity behind them. So 100%.
Yeah, the more sensory it can be, I think the more difference it makes, right?
Definitely. So if we could stand there and go, it's almost like I want to be Wonder Woman. It's like, I'm doing this and blah, 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 that kind of thing. But it just adds more momentum behind the energy.
Very cool. Can we go back a little bit to your own discovery of these gifts that you have? And you said that it was well into your 40s before you realized that, that this was something, and you found a name for it, and you found, maybe a purpose behind it. But in the intervening years, those 25 years between when you discovered that your grandfather was still around, and that you could communicate with him, what were some of the other things that happened in that intervening time where you were, confronted with the idea that this is something that's going on for me, and I have no idea how to categorize it, have no idea how to process it? Can you tell us a little bit about how you integrated all of those things?
It was kind of natural in a way, even though I wasn't accepted, because for me, it's no different if someone can just sing beautifully.
Yeah.
You just can. So it was very much like that for me. So the fact that I could dream something and then turn on the TV and it was there.
Yeah.
It just was. Sometimes that being said, I was kind of amazed. It's like, oh, wow. So I would always, when I had partners, I would sort of share it, because I think it was almost like me writing it down. I have to tell someone that I just had this bizarre dream, and let's just wait for it to be on the TV.
Yeah.
Because there was a whole period in my 20s that it was like that. But it was where I would just use it to live. So, for example, I would have I'm going to call it a vision, where I would just see something and go, I can't go down that street because I can see that a car has had a car accident and the road is blocked.
Yeah.
And there were occasions where I remember once with my mother, I said to her, we can't go down that street because a car has had a car accident. We can't get there. She didn't believe me. We went down there and then she saw it. It's like, oh, okay. So it was just, she never still accepted who I was. She's just like, oh, she just knows things. And with that, there was a lot of judgment in regards to, oh, you just know it all. So I did get a lot that from the family. It's like, you just know it all. You just think you know it all. It's like, no, I can't help what I see. It just is. Yeah. So that was just what life was. I just sensed things. And if I listened to them, life was a little bit easier if I acknowledged them. And if I ignored them, then I'm like kicking myself. It's like, oh, I should have known better, because this is what happened for me. And I know this happens to so many people. And there's probably a lot of people listening. It's like, yeah, the amount of times that I haven't listened to my instincts, my gut, and I'm kicking myself now is because on a level, even though they may not necessarily be seeing things, they're feeling things. They're getting these intuitive hits, because we all do. Mine's just a little bit more. That's all.
Yeah. And yours is accompanied by a visual very often.
I have visual and hearing as well. So for me, I hear things. So particularly if I'm communicating with those that have transitioned, so no bodies anymore. Yeah. I can hear those just like normal conversations.
You'll hear a voice or something like that.
Yeah, just hear them and see and feel. So feel emotions or feel pains. If I sit with someone across from them and they may have some physical health issues, I can feel where it is, how deep it is within the body, if it's significant, if it's just muscular, these type of things. Yeah. Can feel all those kind of things as well.
Is it scary sometimes?
No, not for me. It's because it's not scary because there's no reason to be scared.
Okay.
And there's no
That's
reason
assuring.
there's no reason to be scared. Even when we're talking about people that have transitioned and that are talking to us, even if they weren't really great people when they were here, because we probably know people like that. When they get to the other side, it's sort of like they have to do a whole heap of work on themselves. So they remember if they weren't great people, they remember what they did to other people physically and emotionally. But by going through that process of remembering, it's almost like it's released from them and they shift and change and it's stripped away. So they remember it, but then it's not who they are anymore. Yeah. So there's never any reason to be scared of any interaction with anything. Sometimes we call it ghosts and things like this, anything like that. Quite often it's misunderstanding on our part that we get nervous because we just don't understand. And those in the spirit world would be like, but I'm just watching her bake cookies to make sure she's cooking it properly, like I taught her. Why is she freaking out? Because it's just a misunderstanding. So
why has she forgotten everything that I told her?
That's right. And Grandma's just there like, what is she going on about? Yeah. But there's nothing to be frightened about because at the end of the day, it's energy. That's all it is. And that's what we are.
For you personally, have there been circumstances that you've been in that ended up being really special and significant to you personally?
Plenty.
Yeah.
For me, and sometimes it might seem like, oh, why? But for me, because I am a skeptic and I'm sciencey.
Yeah.
And when I have those moments where I know things that there is no possible way that I could know this, I'm like, what? So that's why I say there's plenty, because that happens a lot. I'm like, even though I know on a level how, I'm still surprised.
Yeah.
And I still seek to be surprised. And so that shows up on all different, it shows up daily when I connect other people with their loved ones. And really unusual, random things their loved ones in spirit tell me. And that surprises me. Not the big picture stuff, because we kind of expect that. But the fact that Dad comes through and says, hi, I'm Jason, and I hate tomatoes because they upset my tummy. I was like, really? So it can be really little things like that. So it can be little things like that.
We won't be having pasta tonight.
That's right. But also it's just the big things as well. Because even when I've had visions that are more impact the collective.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't necessarily understand all the detail of it. And then when it manifests in the world, I'm surprised that I know that.
Yeah.
Of all the people in the world, that I know that.
Wow.
So that surprises me too. I'm sure there's probably other people that know it as well. But on my experience, I get surprised by that. And even then when the warnings that I get for my own life, I find that amazing too, when I get things to help me maneuver through challenges. I think, okay, so all the time.
When you got to your 40s and, you'd been living with this for years and years, and then all of a sudden you got to your 40s and you found that maybe there was a name for this, or that there was an actual, that there were other people that experienced similar things. How did you discover that?
So what happened was I became a mother in my early 30s, and my child was demonstrating things that I recognized.
Okay.
He would be drawing things about people that he'd never met. He knew things from history and locations that he was, 3 and 4. He just shouldn't know. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is what's going to happen next. Right. And I never wanted to make it a big deal. I never wanted to make him really special. My friends would get really excited by the fact that he would connect with people that had transitioned. And I just sort of, while he was young, just tried to parent and not make it a sideshow.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where it was becoming more and more for him And we were getting both sides of what energy could be. So some of those situations where people would be frightened. And I'm like, okay, I didn't actually experience this when I was his age.
Yeah.
Mine was all nice experiences. And I needed to find out more. And so I went on a journey of finding education, teachers, to understand more about energy so I could parent him consciously, because I didn't want him to go through what I did, not recognizing himself, to shut down the mental health issues. I just didn't want that for him. And so I needed to understand myself, get more knowledge, and accept myself. And so I went on this quest to do that, just so I could be a better mother.
It's amazing how our kids choose us for those reasons, isn't it?
Yes. We've had that discussion a lot.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Our kids have our karma at hand. It's just so funny. I'd like to understand a little bit more about how you transitioned into this being. I don't want to use the word career because I don't think that it's a career, but there's definitely a calling around it. And when did you get to the point where you realized that there was a calling with this?
I fought that for 10 years through this seeking knowledge. So there was lots of different ways I obtained the knowledge, and some of it was sitting in a group because my son was invited to join a group, but he was 11 years old, and normally you have to be an adult to join these type of groups. So I had to go with him. So I was sort of pulled into it, and I didn't have, it wasn't a choice. And through that process, we would have to do exercises and practice and this type of thing. And then one day, after many, many years, my teacher said to me, "Oh, would you like to do what's called reading?" And I'm like, no. Not in the slightest. That is not why I joined this group. I joined for my son. No. Everyone else was yes. There was a lot of, trying to manipulate and like, oh, go on, do it, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, no. And she said, well, I'll ring you when we organise this day. And I said, okay, well, you can ring me all you like. I'm still saying no.
Yeah.
And she rang me, and I really don't know. There was obviously a malfunction between my brain and my mouth, because what came out of my mouth was yes. and so I said, well, I'll go, but I'm only going to do one practice reading. I turned up and there was a full day of readings.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Anyway, I had a little stamp of the feet, like, this is not what I said I was going to do.
Yeah.
Did it. And at the end, and I had quite a scope of people to read for from all different ages, and some were hard, some were easy. And at the end of it, I was like, I see why people do this now. I understand.
Yeah. And
so I gently stepped into it. I was a career woman. I had my own business. So it was not, once again, not something that I was interested in doing as a job, or because that's what people call it, or work. Yeah. But as you said, it's not. But the more I did it, the more I could feel the pull. And the interesting thing is, I had this business that I loved, and I was really successful at, and it was my passion. I could work, 20 hours a day into this business.
What was the business?
It was an online perfume retailer.
Oh, very cool.
And I just loved it. But what I noticed was, all of a sudden, it was almost like I was taken out of my hands and the universe took over. And it went from being exceptionally successful to just not as many clients, just not as many customers. And it was like the universe was making space for me to have time to do more readings and spend more time on this spiritual side of myself. And then it just got to a point where I thought, I'm just going to give it a go.
Yeah.
And I still didn't trust myself, so I didn't sell my business. I just shelved it in case it didn't work out. I thought, I'll just, if it doesn't work out and I don't like it, I'll just start again. And And I just said yes, and then just kept going and going. And now it's got that passion that I had in the other business, but it's for different reasons.
Yeah.
And the reason why it is a calling is because of how it's not work. It is who you are, first and foremost. It is also what your life is, because it is that you can't just turn it on and off. You can control it so you don't get, overwhelmed by energy and things like this. But it is such a big part of who you are when you say yes to it, is why it's not a job, it's not work. And also, it's not easy. And there's a whole other side to this that if people realised, they would never call it a job and they would never call it work.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of aspects of it that are not fabulous.
Can you tell me a little bit about, like, was it difficult at any point for you to accept payment for what you do?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very, very difficult.
Even now?
Now it's less so, because I've been lucky enough to have a fabulous mentor that sort of explained it to me in such a way that I can sort of appreciate it a bit more. And the reason why it's difficult is because, one, there's a lot of people out, on the peripherals of life that will say, if it's a gift, you should give it to others. And I understand that. But then in my mind, I go, but singers and musicians and sport players have a gift. And their energy is rewarded for what the exchange of that. So there's that aspect. And so I went through that process of doing it for free. And what I noticed was people didn't value it because I didn't value it.
Okay.
And so then I put a tiny little bit of money on it. And it didn't really shift it either, because it was like, well, they can buy a cup of coffee for that. So they value it the same.
Yeah.
And so I had to work my way through that. And I realized that I had to start valuing what I did, the effort that I put in, and even that energetic connection, so other people would value it.
How long did it take you to come to that place?
That probably was about 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And even now, there's still a little bit of a catch when you get paid for this gift and for this service that you're bringing through.
There is, to that point, I've sort of almost try and take myself out of it and let the computer, like I let them sort of do that sort of transactional side, sort of automated through my booking system, so I don't have to emotionally cope with that. It's like, I don't actually want to accept it off you, so just let the device sort that out for me.
Just enter your number and we'll be fine. Yeah. Well, you mentioned your mentor that you found. How did you come across this mentor? Is it a business mentor, or is it?
No, it's a spiritual.
Okay.
Mentor. It, once again, one of those random things that just happens. Now, she's very well known and she's known internationally, but it was just a friend said, oh, she's doing this this coaching, you should have a look at it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I did, and then I thought, oh, okay. And then I did a few more things with her, because it was nice. We had sort of nice energy match. That frequency that we talked about earlier was kind of the same. Yeah. And then I just did more things with her, and I thought, yeah. And I like it too, because she gives me a kick up the tailpipe when I need it, because I'm one of those ones that will go sometimes kicking and screaming to do something. She's got to drag me along.
Yeah. Digging in the heels. I get it.
That's right. So she doesn't let me get away with anything. Yeah.
You've got a couple of offers for people that I want to make sure that we mention. First of all, I'll give them your website. It's bronwynjanemedium.com. And Bronwyn is spelled Bronwyn. Jane, just like you've always spelled it. And medium, just like you've always spelled it.com. Can you tell us a little bit about the things that you have available for people there?
So when you type in that URL, you backslash and type in podcast. For listeners, there's a downloadable document that will give you some tips on how to look after your energy, how to shift things within your energy, how to even manage, that when we don't feel so great and we just want to feel a little bit better. Yeah. I call it Finding Your Sparkle. So it's got a little bit of that in there. There's also a video series there for people if they feel inclined to watch it, just explaining intuitive children. They may even, when they watch that, recognize themselves within that or someone that they know. And it just goes through different ways to identify them and different things that we need to consider when parenting sensitive children. And then lastly is a course that's discounted for listeners that explains energy, explains how it shows up, these abilities show up within our lives, how to enhance them, because everyone can interpret energy. Yeah. It's not just, just something that a certain group can do. So it walks people through that process and how to do that and how to look after their energy, how to even clear their spaces, which we haven't talked about, that the energy that comes into our space that we need to.
Oh, let's talk about that.
So that just popped into my brain. I thought I wanted to tell you guys about this. So whether we're in our own room or we're in go to an office or something like that, the energy as someone, it's like we leave fingerprints everywhere we go. They're energetic fingerprints though. And no one comes and wipes them down. And so sometimes when we go into spaces, and it can be our own, because sometimes our family might come in and leave their icky fingerprints everywhere, that we need to move that energy on. Once again, it's why sometimes we go there and it feels not great. It can feel heavy, it can feel icky. And so there's a few ways that we can do this. I love sound just because it's a frequency.
Yeah.
So I like to think of it almost like dust. So if we want to be visual about it, how would we get rid of dust?
Yeah.
We're going to open windows. We're going to open doors. We're going to do that. We're going to play some high frequency, that music that makes us want to get out of our chair and jiggle, that kind of sound to shift the energy out of the space. If we've got, some people have things called singing bowls. If we don't have that, I even like a saucepan and a wooden spoon to bang that, and it's almost like you're trying to get something out of the room.
Yeah.
Like other people use different kind of smoking things as well. So incense, California sage, just to shift energy out of a space. So if you go into a room, if it's been closed up a lot, if we don't open our windows, it's going to need to move the energy.
Yeah.
We just need to do that. And it's a nice practice. To me, it's no different to cleaning, physically cleaning. The frequency that you physically clean your space, we need to think about doing that energetically as well.
Isn't it interesting that when we clean our physical space, somehow that affects the energy too?
It does. If you move things, I always say, if life's not going great, or you're wanting something to happen, it's just not happening, reorganize your room.
Yeah.
Reorganize your room, or even look around and go, do I actually like that trinket? Or did I like it 6 months ago and now it annoys me?
Oh, yeah.
I could get rid of it, because that also changes the energy of a space.
Everything that you give away is something that you don't have to dust.
Yes, exactly.
So, Bronwyn, if someone, particularly a younger person, comes along and they, like you, have a realization that, oh my God, Grandpa's not gone. In fact, I can hear him and see him. Where would you start with a person who's experiencing that? And what would you encourage them to do first?
First of all, it would depend on how old they are.
Okay.
So it would depend, because if they're under 18, realistically, their guardian should be involved in the process.
Okay.
So assuming that the guardian is on board,
yeah,
So under that assumption, what I would, first of all, I always do is just get them to explain what they're going through, to also make them aware that, first of all, it's normal.
Yeah.
Because too often they believe it's not. There's a lot of children that get medicated because their parents think that there's something else going on.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to have the discussion with the parents as well. So we would go through that it's normal, understand exactly what's happening for them and where their challenges are, because everyone will have a little bit of a different experience. Some people may not be able to sleep, so we would specifically look at tools to help with sleep, because that's quite difficult for sensitive people. Sleep, we wake up, can't settle. Give them tools to manage their mind, because sensitive people, their minds operate faster than others, and it has to be able to sense what is being sensed.
Yeah.
So give them skills for that, introduce them to meditation, introduce them to looking after their body, because that's part of the process as well. We need to look after our body. And then really just look at where they've got challenges. If they've got no challenges and they're just maneuvering through, then we'll just educate them in regards to how to make it more, if that's what they want.
Yeah.
But if they've got challenges, we'll look at the specific challenges on how to help them with that. Tools that, make them able to live in this world by looking after their energy, being able to cope with others because they get overwhelmed. So all those kind of skills, how to distract, if they've got spirits around, how to distract them so they can function at school, because sometimes they'll bother them at school.
Yeah.
Function at home, how to just process things.
At this point in your life, I mean, are there things that you would look back on and say you wish that they would have been different? On a level, no, because it's where I got to by everything that I've gone through. But realistically, the only thing that I would say is maybe that I was not told that I was a know-it-all. That would have been nice. Yeah.
That's all. There was quite a bit of projection from family, but I understand now that they were operating and do operate to the best of their ability based on what they know.
Yeah.
And so therefore I have that awareness. And so that's why when I look back, I go, well, they were operating based on the skills that they had at that time. They couldn't have done any better.
Right.
I'm asking them to be something that they weren't capable of. Yeah.
On a broader level then, I mean, for people who hear this conversation and go, wow, that's weird, what would you like them to know about what's happening? Now you've said that it's normal and it's just energy, but what would you say to them in terms of helping them to understand for themselves?
Sometimes it is weird.
Yeah.
I even think that too. I go, gee whiz, that was kind of crazy. But first of all, it's not, I've never thought that it's my role to change anyone's opinion on anything.
Yeah.
That being said, though, when I do encourage those people that project and judge and troll and all the things that occur as part of that less than wonderful aspect of this life, I would encourage them to consider that scientific place. Understand energy. Understand your energy, so atoms. Understand how electrons work.
Yeah.
Understand that every thought, every action, every intention is energy, has a vibration, and all someone is doing is finding language that matches that frequency. That's all it is. It's finding language or some kind of communication that matches the frequency of every thought that you have, every action that you take, every intention that is within you. It's being interpreted. If they're not interested in that, I wish you well. Good luck. And send them on their way.
I don't think there's anything that we should add to that. I think we should cap things right there with that message, because I feel like that's everything that needs to be said.
I agree. And I just want to remind everyone to know that if they are feeling something, if they are struggling with mixing with people, to maybe try some of the things that we talked about at the start of the podcast and just see if it makes life a little bit easier for them.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, fine, forget about it. But it may actually make those kind of situations a little bit easier as they have to go and experience the world and interact with people that they don't necessarily enjoy.
Wonderful advice. Thank you. My guest on Your Own Best Company this episode has been Bronwyn Jane. And again, you can find Bronwyn at bronwynjanemedium.com, and be sure to check out the special offers. I think there's a / in there, and podcast as well, if you want to go directly to the offer and to the podcast. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing, Bronwyn?
I just want to thank everyone for listening and being open to considering what I'm sharing with them. And even just maybe start being a little bit more aware of what they're feeling, and know that they are capable too of feeling energy and understanding what it is. And thank you everyone for your time. And thank you, Franklin, for your time.
Oh, it's my delight. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got a chance to actually meet and talk. This has been wonderful.
I've enjoyed it too. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to Your Own Best Company. If you enjoyed the show, would you do me a favor and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast host? If you really love it, leave me a review or share it with your circles. If you feel like your career is reaching a dead end, or you're feeling a deep sense of dissatisfaction in your work right now, I help people discover their gifts and then find or create new opportunities that are the best fit for their talent, experience, and lifestyle. Email me at coaching@franklintaggart.com for more information. I also help people start, finish, and launch creative projects, and I offer an ongoing marketing mastermind for solopreneurs and freelancers. More information on these programs and services can be found at franklintaggart.com. Thanks again for spending this time with me.